Israeli police are recommending criminal charges of corruption and bribery against the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. The police say there's enough evidence. There's enough evidence to indict Benjamin Netanyahu, not only for bribery, but also for fraud and for breach of trust in two totally separate cases. So, first case, Benjamin Netanyahu allegedly asked the publisher of a newspaper in Israel to portray him positively when they talk about him. And in exchange, Benjamin Netanyahu would try to suppress a rival newspaper's success. Not good, not good. The other case is one about Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly receiving gifts valued at nearly 300,000 US dollars from a variety of different supporters, including champagne and cigars, with the idea of getting a Hollywood mogul named Arnon Milchan a US visa. And police say that right after Netanyahu received those gifts, he also started pushing for a law which would allow Israelis who return to live in Israel after living elsewhere for some time to not pay taxes for 10 years. And then lastly, in another case, Netanyahu is suspected of fraud and breach of trust relating to a Russian billionaire named James Packer, who apparently also made a bunch of gifts to Netanyahu and his wife. So obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu is denying the entire thing, and it now is up to the attorney general to decide, are we going to file charges or not? And that could take months. Let's break this down into the sort of broader analysis, right? I've been rallying against Benjamin Netanyahu for what, a decade at this point? I think he's terrible for Israel. I think he is terrible for any reasonable prospect for Palestinian peace. He doesn't want peace, right? Benjamin Netanyahu benefits from a more escalated status quo in Israel. He's also aligned in a coalition with the most vile, retrograde, religious right-wing elements of Israeli politics. It's an alliance that is completely deplorable and depraved. And there's just not going to be any serious steps towards peace when Benjamin Netanyahu is Prime Minister of Israel. So I think he should have been voted out already, but he hasn't been. So listen, if these crimes are crimes he committed, and that remains to be seen, then this is as good a way as any of getting Benjamin Netanyahu out of power. If this removes him ultimately, then that's great and that's good, even if it's a different sequence than we might have imagined. Now, Netanyahu needs to go one way or the other, right? There's a question as to whether is the attorney general really going to charge a sitting prime minister? And the answer is, well, there's precedent for it. In Israel previously, there have been indictments and charges filed against sitting prime ministers. At the same time, there have also been allegations made against Benjamin Netanyahu in the past that didn't lead to charges, arguably because prosecutors decided we just don't have enough evidence here. If true, these are really serious crimes because they completely undermine the political system. And this is a guy, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been just a totally toxic influence on Israeli politics and on the peace process, the almost non-existent peace process, for which, yes, Benjamin Netanyahu is not the only one to blame. And you know, I've talked about that before, but for a long time, he has been an impediment to peace. So am I personally offended by the allegations against Benjamin Netanyahu? No, I've always known that he's basically just a right-wing extremist whose priorities are just not in line with the people of Israel. Do I believe he'll ultimately be charged? I really don't know, but any path to the successful removal of Benjamin Netanyahu is something that we should all be in favor of, because this guy is not going to be good for anybody over the long term. The video you just watched was made possible by support from you. Please go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show. You can make a pledge of as little as $1 per month. And every dollar helps to support the work that we're doing, particularly in light of the YouTube ad boycott, which has been really bad.